Right, hello. I want to talk about magic with you. I've been noticing recently in a lot of the discussions around books on things like Goodreads and YouTube that magic tends to get short shrift. You know, we talk about it a little bit. We'll say this is hard magic, this is soft magic, here's how the magic works, and then we'll just move on. We'll go on to things like character and setting and theme and world building, but then we'll just sort of acknowledge that the magic is there and then let it go. Which is bananas! Because the author has spent so much time, often, crafting a magic system that deliberately serves the story they're trying to tell, and we just sort of go, yep, it's there, and we move on. And I've been trying to work out why this is, and I'm not sure I've come to any hard and fast conclusions. I suspect part of it is that, outside of fantasy as a subgenre, when we go into the wider reading community, we're still a little bit embarrassed, maybe, of fantasy, even if we're not consciously saying that. We want our fantasy books to be regarded as literature with a capital L, as they often are, don't get me wrong, but that means that we kind of shut down that part of the conversation that might seem like a little bit more silly. I don't know, I could be wrong, but I am noticing that we do skirt past the magical elements. And I think the thing that damages this conversation the most, or certainly is damaging this conversation, is the hard versus soft magic system binary. So if you're not aware, hard magic system can be defined as any kind of magical element in a text that follows a clear, standard set of rules. Now, those rules might change depending on the plot, but they're there. The rules are set in stone, and we are aware of them as readers. Soft magic system is the opposite. The magic might be very present on the page, but it is not guided by any clear set of rules. It might have a couple of sort of brackets, but compared to the hard magic systems that we all know, Brandon Sanderson being the most famous example, it's much more gooey. There's a lot more malleability with soft magic when a story is being written. But I do think this is a larger issue, that we're defining our magic based on whether it's hard or soft or somewhere in the middle, the spectrum of magic engineering. And that's how we have that conversation. And I think that is just so limiting. I'm not saying that soft and hard magic systems can't be part of the discussion, but when that is the discussion, or 60-70% of the discussion, when someone says, tell me about the magic system, oh, it's a hard magic system where metal is manipulated, that is just so trite. It's so facile. It's too simplistic. I think we can do better, and I think we need to do better. We need to do better as a community. Yeah, that's the first time I've said that on my channel. We kind of lump magic into the world building, and it is part of the world building, but it's a substantial part of the world building. It's not like, are there trees in this world? It's much more deep-rooted than that, pun intended. So what I've done is I've written down 3 different approaches you can have when you're thinking about the magic system in a book you've just finished or are currently reading that might give readers a little bit more of a toolkit into the way that they're examining their fiction. They're quite broad, they're quite general. I think actually all 3 of them can be applied to pretty much any fantasy book. So the first way I want to kind of reframe the conversation is to center magic as an outpouring of the central themes of the fantasy work. Breaking apart what the magic system is doing, both in terms of its mechanics and in terms of the plot at large, will allow you to identify the themes of the text and also what those themes are doing, how they're being raised by the author, and whether the author is coming to any hard and fast conclusion on those themes. I will give you the easiest example in the world. Harry Potter. I was one of those guys who audiobooked Harry Potter all the way through primary school. So from the ages of 6 through 12, every night going to bed, I would listen to one of the cassettes of the Harry Potter audiobooks. So that series is just stamped right here, printed, tattooed deep onto my brain. One of the central, this is the easiest example, one of the central defining themes of Harry Potter is sacrifice and love, and the interplay between sacrifice and love. It's the thing that permeates so much of the text. And that is the magic system of Harry Potter. Obviously Harry Potter has the utility belt of spells. You can make things glow, you can open doors. But when things get most dramatic in Harry Potter, it's always about either love or sacrifice. That's it. It's really that simple. The most obvious example is the one at the very start of the first book, where Harry Potter's mother sacrifices herself to save Harry, and that seems to create some kind of magical connection that is enough, it's just enough to save Harry's life. Love is magic in Harry Potter. So that's a really obvious example of the interplay between theme and magic in Harry Potter, but there's others that are a bit more speckled and a little bit more small throughout the whole text. Peter Pettigrew, Harry saves Peter Pettigrew's life. He does not allow him to be killed by Sirius Black. Peter Pettigrew survives, and because of that, Dumbledore says something at the end of book 3, something along the lines of, and I'm sure that Peter Pettigrew will honour that debt at some point. What happens at the end of book 7? If I'm remembering right, Peter Pettigrew literally has a chokehold on Harry, and his magical hand, his magical glove, loosens at the last minute. Peter Pettigrew is forced to make that sacrifice because he has to repay that debt that comes from book 3. And the magic sort of encourages that. There's a flinch in the hand that allows Harry Potter to survive, and Peter Pettigrew sacrifices his chance at success. Hello, I've just been editing in a coffee shop and I've been rereading the Harry Potter scene that I was just talking about, and I realised that I've misremembered the scene a little bit. It's not just that Peter Pettigrew's hand flinches, the hand literally turns around and strangles Peter Pettigrew to death. So I don't know if that makes my point more, because technically that Peter Pettigrew's body is choosing to sacrifice himself to let Harry survive, but also, obviously, the hand is tied to dark magic and things like that. So I just wanted to clear that one up in the editing room. Let me know your thoughts. Do you think that one now holds more water or less? Anyway, back to the video. But you know, the most remarkable, from my perspective, twinning of theme and magic in recent texts that I have read has to be Robin Hobb. Robin Hobb is just the master at this. You unstitch Robin Hobb's plot, it has like 9 or 10 different things going on, and you unstitch her magic and it has 9 or 10 things going on, and every single thing in that magic system is in some way serving the themes that are brought up by the plot itself. So broadly speaking, Robin Hobb's magic system has 2 different varieties in Realm of the Elderlings. You've got the skill and you've got the will, right? Skill and will. Or is that Fable? No, that's Fable. Sorry, that's the Fable games. You've got the skill and the wit. Okay? Wit, basically, very broadly speaking, allows the character who has that magical ability to commune with animals, to understand what they're thinking, understand their thought processes, to some extent persuade them of stuff, and also to bond with them. It's almost like a soulmate kind of a thing. And the skill is much more people-based. It allows you to communicate with people over long distances. It allows you to manipulate people. It allows you to kind of plant little suggestions on what should happen into the future. So again, very broadly speaking, one is people-based and one is animal-based. But whenever you're talking about magic in Robin Hobb, you can't really escape the fact that you're interacting with another consciousness. That is the central part of the magic system. You cannot really do it in isolation, certainly not to any great extent. It has to be in some sort of symbiotic relationship with someone else. Whether you're doing it to harm them or whether you're doing it to help them out, the magic doesn't exist in isolation. And when you start to unspool Robin Hobb's stories, what are the main themes that come across? Well, the main one that comes across over and over and over again is human connection and interaction with the other, and you cannot remain in isolation. It's just not possible. And if you do try and remain in isolation, it can be incredibly damaging. It's so trite to say that no man is an island, but that really is one of the core tenets of the outpouring of the theme in Hobb's books. And the interaction with other people is what makes us who we are. There are so many moments in this series where characters are stepping on one another's toes or manipulating each other. Even when they like each other, they're manipulating each other. There's a question of loyalty in Robin Hobb. By serving one person, are you by necessity having to be underhanded with someone else or scheme against someone else? Everything in Hobb, everything is about human connection, for better or worse. And so is the magic system. Robin Hobb is so good. I'm so happy I've got like 7 Robin Hobb books to go. You know, one of the worst things that can happen to you in Realm of the Elderlings, again, slight spoiler here, but it's in book 1, it's very early on, is you can be something called forged, which is when magic is used to suck away all care about anyone else in your life. You basically become this husk, this shell. You're still thinking, and you're still to some extent feeling, but you're extremely narcissistic and selfish. Everything you do is purely to serve your own ends. You do not care about your family anymore. You do not care about your friends anymore. This, in Realm of the Elderlings, is the worst thing that can happen to you. And it's done by magic. So again, if you were to crack open the magic system in Robin Hobb, you will see all the themes that have already been carried through by the character interactions, by the dialogue, and by the plot. It's been there in the magic system since book 1. She's wonderful! She's so good! So yeah, I would encourage you to see magic as an outpouring of theme. That's number 1. Number 2, magic system as a representation of social structure. Unless your story is taking place in the equivalent of like 5000 BC, you are going to have some systems and structures at work in this story. And you know what? I take that back. Even 5,000 years ago, they had systems and structures. There will be places of education in a fantasy book. There will be cities. There will be governments. There will be hospitals. You know, different fantasy books will emphasize these things differently, but they will be there. And so often I find in fantasy books, the magic system is used to enhance that representation of the social order of things, of the systems at play in this fantasy world. Some of these are very on the nose. And I'm sure you're thinking of some already, because again, Harry Potter would be one example, right? You've got mudbloods versus what are they called, squibs, versus magic users versus purebloods. There's a stratification based on the magic system of Harry Potter. It's almost like a caste system in Harry Potter. People do see each other differently depending on where they fall in that magical pecking order. That's a really obvious one. Another really obvious one is Brandon Sanderson's Warbreaker. In Warbreaker, everyone is born with one breath, and breath is what allows you to kind of see the world in all its colorful vibrancy. Okay, you can smell things more, you can see things more, you have a keener set of senses, but also it's kind of implied more joy in what you experience around you. If you've got your breath taken away, everything is going to be dull and grey and flat. But what goes on in Warbreaker is that the people at the top of the food chain, ostensibly the gods, are the ones with hundreds and hundreds of breaths, and the people at the bottom have to basically sell their breath to survive. Another obvious example, Wheel of Time. Okay, I've said my piece on the Wheel of Time, but one thing it does is this very well, where the magic system is absolutely intertwined with how the world operates. Men have access to one type of magic, which is poisoned and tainted, and if you are able to access that magic, you will eventually just go mad. Women, on the other hand, have access to a pool of magic that is clean and pure, and basically allows them to have the major seats of power in this world, or at least one of the major seats of power. So Harry Potter, Warbreaker, Wheel of Time, all of these have magic systems which in some way intersect with the social order of things. Another one would be Blood over Brighthaven, but I've talked about that book previously, so I won't get into it right now. Let me talk about two more that I think are a little bit more subtle, though, or a little bit more complex, but sort of play with the same elements. The first one is The Wandering Inn. I love seeing people read The Wandering Inn, because half the people say, this is the most amazing thing I've ever read in my life. I can't believe there's like 100,000 pages of this. And half the people who read The Wandering Inn go, this is it. I can never tell who's going to love The Wandering Inn. It's the other thing. People that I suspect will hate it, love it. And people who I suspect will love it kind of turn their nose up at it. And turn the nose up at it is very negative, but decide that it's not for them. One thing The Wandering Inn does magnificently is playing with social structure based on magic. The Wandering Inn is a lit RPG. Characters gain classes, they gain levels in those classes. When you get to a certain amount of levels in the text, you unlock new skills, new abilities. So you're incentivized by the world of The Wandering Inn to work on the stuff that you're good at as much as possible, because this will raise you up the food chain. Let's say you want to be a gardener. Maybe you have to work really hard, you have to garden every day, you have to become a really clever gardener, and that will allow you to become a level 20 gardener, and that will then allow you to propel yourself further in the gardening world. That's a really silly example. I mean, the key one is strategy, right? If you want to be a military general, you have to play chess, you have to plan out your strategy, you have to think very carefully and craftily about how you want to do your next battle, because if you do that, not only will you win your battle, but you'll raise up a couple of levels, and that will then get you further into the system that you have chosen to invest in. It seems at the beginning just sort of a manifestation of what kind of happens in our world, which is that you work hard and you gain more skill. It's just a kind of an explicit version of that. But the more you think about it, and I think people need to talk about this more in The Wandering Inn, the more you think about it, the more you realize that characters are hamstrung and limited by this leveling system. A lot of people are limited by the choices they made early on, and so they can't almost like career swap halfway through, and they have to kind of be stuck with what they have. Some characters, being born into an immense amount of privilege, will be given tutors and stuff from a very young age, which will allow them to very, very quickly, even if they're idiots, gain a large amount of levels. What essentially at the beginning seems very egalitarian, very equal, the more you pick at it, you realize that actually it's a real limiter on your success in this world. And I love that about The Wandering Inn. I love that the levels aren't just move up, get better, get more powerful. It's much more complex than that. And I think that's to its credit. And you know what? There is a character in The Wandering Inn who basically goes, no, I reject all levels. Whenever someone tries to level them up, they go, nah, I'm done with you. Nope, not going to get leveled up. I refuse to take part in the system that everyone else in this world participates in. I think Para Abba is incredibly clever and deft with the way that they handle the magic system in this world, and how it relates not just to one structure. It's not like it's just set in a university or a hospital or a government, but rather the magic system pervades the structures across the whole world. It's inescapable, which makes it kind of terrifying for such a readable, fast series. And the third one, and the last one I want to talk about, is magic system as a shifter of world view. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, let's say that right now I'm sitting in this cafe. Let's say behind me, the sky opened up and, I just made a video about a short stay in hell. Let's say that the Zoroastrian god opens the clouds and goes, hi, actually, Zoroastrianism is correct. All the other religions are wrong. Sorry, guys, get your act together. It's a very extreme example, but what that would do is it would fundamentally change the way I see the world. I might go, okay, listen, Zoroastrianism, true, sign me up. I might go, no, this is some kind of maybe hellish influence from another religion trying to trick me. But there is no feasible scenario where I look at the heavens opening and God popping out and speaking to me, where I carry on as normal. So I think it's very interesting to see to what extent the magic system, especially if it's being introduced in a world, disrupts the status quo. Whether that's the status quo of the whole world, or whether that's the status quo of one person, one character. I think the Dresden Files is doing this very well. As the Dresden Files goes on, more and more people become aware that actually there is some supernatural influence in this world. There are vampires, there are fairies, there is ultra-mundane contact and conflict in this world. And I'm very interested to see, as I progress through the Dresden Files and the books that are still to be written, how that is going to impact those books. My worry is that it's going to be like Doctor Who, where everyone suddenly realizes that aliens exist and then next week they've all forgotten. That really annoys me about Doctor Who, actually. And like the new era, the kind of David Tennant era, is awful at that, where everyone will realize that aliens have come down and then the next week they're just kind of making cups of tea again and they don't really care. And actually the next time there's an alien invasion, they all go, aliens! And it's like, where were you last week? Were you in a coma? This has happened before. Magic systems, whether because they're like forces of nature consistently in a world, or because they're being introduced, or because they're being sucked away, will shift the way that people see the world. There is just no avoiding that. You can't avoid that. So one big example of this is H.P. Lovecraft, okay? Maybe more horror than fantasy, but certainly the two are pretty much like this. Call of Cthulhu, right? The whole plot of Call of Cthulhu is the main character, first-person perspective, uncovering that actually there are these ancient eldritch entities that we are powerless to exist. And actually, Cthulhu is one of the minor versions of these eldritch entities. And Call of Cthulhu basically ends with the main character going, well, that's my world over. Because even if I continue and try to live life as normal, that's going to be fake. That's going to be false. Because I have seen what reality is like, and there is no going back. Horror is a great example of this, but you can't really talk about many present-day examples without spoiling the book. Lots of Stephen King novels are like this. I won't name specific Stephen King novels, but a lot of them do this, playing with the fact that the world is fundamentally changed forever, and there is no going back. Once you've seen behind the curtain, for good or ill, that's it. I'd say another example, maybe not an example, but a broad category of texts that kind of implement this, is book series where the magic is draining out of the world or has been drained out of the world, right? So Joe Abercrombie does this. Lord of the Rings does this. Game of Thrones is the opposite. The magic has dwindled away and is now starting to come back a little bit. The Demonata series by Darren Shan does this magnificently. Magic used to be a huge, big, powerful force in the world, and it is no longer. So the character's realization that 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 years ago, we were living in a world of supernatural entity and cosmic power, and now we're not. Again, that is going to disrupt and shift your worldview. And it's not always negative. I'll go back to my first example at the very beginning of the video, which is Harry Potter. Harry is sitting there in the cupboard under the stairs. He gets the letter saying that he is going to go to Hogwarts. He realizes that magic exists, and this positively changes his worldview for the better. It's not always nihilism when the magic is uncovered. Narnia is very similar. When you discover that the world is a magical place, this can also shift your worldview positively. It gives you agency. It gives you empowerment. It often gives you a sense of purpose. Magic cannot help but shift your worldview, especially in Portal Fantasy, but really in all magic systems in general. So that's it for my little discussion. Magic as an outplaying of theme. Magic as a representation of social structure. Magic as a shifter of worldview. I think these three things give us a bit more of a toolkit that will allow us to probe the magic systems in a given fantasy story a little bit more deeply. Of course, there are other things you can talk about. You could talk about magic as utility belt. You could talk about magic as pedagogy. You could talk about magic as weapon. But I think the important thing is that we need to have these discussions that go a bit deeper than just hard, soft, and which one do I like. I think that is the most damaging thing we can do as readers of text. So yeah, let me know what you think. Do you think I'm being a bit smug and everyone's already having this discussion without me? Can you think of any other texts that relate to what I'm talking about right now? Let me know. Thanks for watching, and in the meantime, I will see you next time. Bye.